Hey Atlanta, say hello to small business help from Apple. That's right, we're here to make starting and running your business simpler. From helping you choose the right devices to setting them up hassle-free, we can help you build your business in no time. Speak to a business expert and get the help you need at no cost whatsoever. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Everything about it just made me nostalgic for like that face-off level logic of like, we're gonna go to a prison where the shoes are magnetized to the floor, you know, the cryo prisons and stuff like that. Goofy, fun world building, and that was my biggest takeaway was, oh man, I missed the way these movies were made.
1993/94, Sandra Bullock was a big hero of mine, and I think she's fantastic in this. She's really spunky, she's really cute, she's really ditzy, and she's also kind of holds her own against Sylvester Stallone. And it's just, everyone's just having a great time. It's completely ridiculous, and it's just so much fun. Hello everyone, joining Flixwatcher today we have Simon.
Greetings and salutations.
David.
Hi there, great to be here.
And as always, Kobe.
What is my boggle?
And we are reviewing Demolition Man. Thank you as always to the mighty people for the mighty tunes, and thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at FlixWatcher. Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher Podcast. Joining us remotely today we have Simon and David. If you could please say hello and tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Hi everyone, my name's Simon Williams. I am one half of You're Gonna Need a Bigger Boat, London's biggest and best film quiz, I think I can safely say. That's about it, me, I think.
Yeah, you've been to other quizzes, haven't you? The film quizzes. What do you think of them?
Hey, you know what? We've been running this quiz for 16 years, and I absolutely love doing other quizzes. I never get to play. So yeah, I can give a couple of shout outs. There's a Prince Charles Cinema. Yeah. Does a pretty good quiz. Yeah. There are some that pop up every now and again. Den of Geek did a very rare one that was very hard to get into. But you know, for the size of the city of London, there really should be more of them.
It's such an interesting thing because Helen and I didn't know each other beforehand. Helen didn't know anyone on the film quiz team before there's a tweet out saying, let's form a quiz team. But it's such a weird kind of sociable thing that gets people excited. And there's, what's it like from your side of things when you see the same people turning up inside and out week in, week out, and you recognize the faces? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's like the old guy in the pub who wants his stall. You know what? We've been doing it so many years. I've made really, really good friends. You know, now I've got a family. It's pretty much my only social life. Although now, because thanks to COVID, zero social life. But yeah, we've made some great friends over the years. We have some absolutely dedicated regulars who come back every month. We used to, and you know, we're really hoping to get back as soon as we can.
Yeah, we love it. We miss it. Can't wait to be back.
Thank you.
And we should say we are the current reigning champions as of May.
Oh, I didn't know. You're hoping it never comes back.
I mean, there's things like that which would help us out massively. It will be it'll be in all our Wikipedia. Forever. It'll be in our epitaphs. That's how it'll be. David, who are you?
Hi, my name's David Trumble. I'm a story artist for animated features, currently working on the Dahl adaptations at Netflix Animation. And I'm lucky enough to every now and again be invited on film podcasts of friends of mine, like Sudden Double Deep, Spotlight. But having, obviously now started working at Netflix Animation, Flixwatcher was really like the big one for me. I really wanted to hook this fish just because of my connection to Netflix.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. And Roald Dahl is an interesting one. How scary are you allowed to get for these animations? Because
well, obviously, I don't want to give anything away because obviously these are all like under lock and key right now. But anyone who reads Roald Dahl knows that it's a property that simultaneously is hard to adapt whilst also being considered a sacred text. So it's like it is terrifying just in general because so many people have opinions as to what these books are. And the more I've been consumed in these characters in this world, the more I realized that. You have to go big or go home. So thankfully, we've got some incredible creators over at Netflix Animation because they've been cherry picking, the best of the best from the industry. Because this is a relatively young company. It's a studio without any set house style, and a lot of people coming off of these other big studios, the big three like Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks. Because they realize that, it's kind of exciting to get in on the ground floor of something that's new and figuring out what it is. So I'm very excited to work on a property like this because Netflix are banking on some really individual voices. Look at something like Elizabeth Ito's City of Ghosts, for example, was one of the best kid shows I've seen in a very long time. And, even investing in international animations like I Lost My Body, the French film, which was reviewed on this podcast as well as a great episode. And things like Wendell and Wild by Henry Selick, which is the movie I was on before this.
I was going to say, one question I was going to ask you was, are you going to stick or twist from the Quentin Blake figure styles?
That, I'm afraid I cannot answer. That would be considered a violation of my non-disclosure agreement. But I will tell you that fans of these books and everything they represent, we're hoping will be very happy with the way it looks and feels. We're trying to get down, exactly. Well, end of the day, I've got a shelf just lined with every single one of those books, which I've been reading religiously. So those Quentin Blake illustrations are right there. And if you want to watch a Quentin Blake movie, just open those books and you'll be right there.
Go back to movies. We are here talking about Demolition Man. Demolition Man was your choice, Simon. Can you tell us, first of all, why you chose it and a synopsis in less than 60 seconds?
Well, it's probably the best film named after a Grace Jones song. Second one being La Vie en Rose, obviously. I'll give you a quick plot synopsis. You've got LA's greatest cop, John Spartan, in a vaguely apocalyptic LA, slightly in the future, going up against LA's worst criminal, Simon Phoenix, played by Wesley Snipes. There's a massive massacre at the start. Spartan gets framed, sent down into this revolutionary new cryo prison where he's frozen, gets sentenced to 70 years frozen, along with Phoenix. Then the twist is that Phoenix is awakened in the future, but he's awakened in this future that's forgotten about violence. It's a completely safe, kind of sanitized society that just does not know how to deal with somebody like Simon Phoenix. So the solution is to defrost John Spartan to set a maniac to catch a maniac.
So why did you choose it?
Why did I choose it? I chose it because I was having a look through Netflix, and it's one film that I really loved when I was younger. I hadn't seen it for ages. It's one of those films that really sticks in your mind. It's so quotable, as we did in the intro there. I remember it being quite funny, action-packed. And I just wanted to find out if it was as good as I remembered it.
I think that's one of the places where Netflix really helps out. It really works. Is if film you haven't seen for a while or since you're an adolescent or kid, and it's there, it's hard not to press. Oh, go fuck it! I'm gonna watch it. Kind
90s
of
action movies and thrillers. That's what I use it for.
Yeah. Helen and Dave? What were your thoughts on Demolition Man?
I was very excited to re-experience this. This also looms large in my childhood. I love that Simon says that it's set in the very near future. It's set 3 years after the movie was made. So it has this wonderful opening shot, which is basically...
the start of it was set 3 years after the movie.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. It's basically set in 1996. The movie was made in 1993. And so it's basically the Blade Runner shot of this is what Los Angeles will look like in the near future. Blade Runner was made in 1982 and set in 2019. So this was a very grim, even more grim than Ridley Scott's vision of what LA is going to become. But instantly from the opening minutes, it basically begins with John Spartan jumping out of a helicopter. Me and my twin brother Steve will always remember the moment where he jumps out of the helicopter and screams, "Phoenix!" Phoenix to absolutely nobody, literally nobody. Not even the helicopter pilots would have been able to hear him, let alone Simon Phoenix in the building below. And so from that moment onwards, you're like, oh, it's that kind of movie. It is a movie based upon comic book rules. It feels like a Joel Schumacher sort of Batman movie from that era as well. Like Snipes is essentially playing the Joker to Sly Stallone's Batman. And, watching this movie makes me feel like, shit, they missed a trick. I would have happily watched a Batman movie with those two as the Dark Knight and the Clown Prince of Crime. So yeah, coming back to it, I know that it's a movie with a lot of satire in it and, a lot of things that may or may not have aged well. But watching it, the biggest takeaway I got from it was just how much I missed the way movies were made in the 90s. Shot on film. They didn't have particle effects or the ability to put smoke and flames into things, in a very like basically filled with smoke machines and dry ice and real sparks and things. It just reminded me how alive those movies felt when you had them on VHS and you were just like, and just like, stuff like those amazing box-like sci-fi computers that are just like, the text is massive. all the digital screens look like they were made in like an old Macintosh paint program. It's like everything about it just made me nostalgic for like that face-off level logic of like, we're going to go to a prison where the shoes are magnetized to the floor. The cryo prisons and stuff like that. It was quite, goofy, fun world building, and that was my biggest takeaway was, oh man, I missed the way these movies were made.
Helen?
13-year-old me absolutely loved this film. And 39-year-old me absolutely loved this film as well.
Hey.
It was great to revisit it. And I'd kind of been hovering over, should I watch it? Should I watch it for a while? So I'm really happy that you picked it and we could talk about it, Simon. 1993/94, Sandra Bullock was a big hero of mine, and I think she's fantastic in this. She's really spunky, she's really cute, she's really ditzy, and she's also kind of holds her own against Sylvester Stallone. And Wesley Snipes' wardrobe, I think, is incredible. And it's just, everyone's just having a great time. It's completely ridiculous, and it's just so much fun. And it's kind of this sort of believable futuristic view, and you're kind of like, yeah, I can kind of imagine that. And I just love all like the retro stuff she has, which she kind of finds really funny, and they're singing along to the hot dog song in the car, and yeah, it's great. And
sing along to jingles. And
and I think like when I watched it when I was younger, I just thought like eating a rat burger was like the funniest thing in the world. And we used to say, oh, you were having a rat burger when we were eating burgers all the time. And that with the eyeball on the pen, when he tries to get out with that, I thought that was the best thing ever. I still think it's the best thing ever. So yeah.
This for me is one of the films where I understood about the excitement for films coming. It was like a short story on, it wasn't Newsround, but some kind of kids program where there's going to be a film coming out next year where Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone are frozen and then unfrozen, and they have to fight each other in the future. I was like, yes, this is exactly the film I want to watch, and it was exactly the film I want to watch, and it's such a fun, ridiculous film. There's a few things, just films set in the future. There's some nonsense bit. They're just things that could be easily written out of the script to just make it make sense. And I think the biggest thing here is, it should be set like 150 years from when they were frozen, not 40 years, because you've got people in living memory who know the things that they grew up with, and it's still, and for me, that makes no sense that they can't remember how to have sex, or, that they use toilet paper. Things like that, which like, just make it 100 years later and everything that you're doing is kind of fine, because it doesn't matter. There's no one who can remember the things that you used to do. Apart from that, I'm happy with all the nonsense. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that I must admit, that's one thing I did think, that it's like the older people who have lived. I think they mentioned that Warden Smithers was born in 1967 or something. So, he had quite a big chunk of his life before it all went crazy, and then got crazier, depending on how you view the future world. And yet they all seem to have amnesia about the simplest concepts.
Spartan's wife dies, and so Spartan's wife dies in the event, but those other people survive. So it's a bit like, how serious was this event, and how come you survived but they didn't? So it's I think if you think about it too much, then it all unravels. So try not to.
But that's the point of me, because I don't think I think for me, it's just that one wrinkle that if it was ironed out, then the rest of it just is fine. Because you like I say, Smithy and your man who was in the same unit as John Spartan, probably started at the same time as each other. Has he lost his mind? Has he actually lost his mind and he literally can't remember how life used to be?
Yeah, I
can remember everything from 40 years ago. I can remember it.
It's a bit like it's a bit like how can Sandra Bullock have a Lethal Weapon poster in her office and have watched Jackie Chan movies and yet still doesn't know how to say let's go blow this guy. You know what I mean? Properly. You know what I mean? Like, it's like there's a certain amount of suspension of disbelief because if like a lot of movies that playfully come up with a satirical take on the future, if you pick apart anything, it'll fall. It'll collapse like a house of cards. But you just have such a good time with it.
That's it. That's it. It's just that one. If it's set 140 years in the future, I think everything like that is fine because I'm happy with going into a museum. I don't mind going to a museum to find guns and the guns are fully loaded and you can just walk around and start shooting them. I'm happy with that because that drives the plot forward. Fine. And Sandra Bullock knowing exactly what that car is, but still not knowing how to say blow yourself. There are inconsistencies
in that regard. I think you know what I like the fact that there are characters who we see in the past and the future. So I like the fact that you've got the warden who's he's the assistant warden when he puts him under, and then he's the warden when he takes him out. And then you've got Grandel Bush's character who actually gets the first line in the opening scene, and then he's I can't remember what his character's name is, but then he's the older guy played by Bill Cobbs in the future snes. So I like the fact there is that connection. But yeah, it does come across a bit weird that they all seem to have got some mass amnesia. I don't know how that's happened. Maybe it was such a traumatic. The event that you mentioned, Helen, is the big one of 2010, in which Spartan's wife's light was prematurely extinguished.
I do love all the future nonsense though. The not having sex. No exchange of fluids, the three seashells, the credits for swearing, even saying damn, and also just putting someone like Simon Phoenix in there who has none of these guardrails around him, and he just has an absolute whale of a time kicking ass, basically. I just really enjoy the mayhem. I really, really enjoy the mayhem, and then you get people like Jesse's Body Ventura and going underground. I think this film for me is pure silliness.
It's a romp, isn't it?
It is.
And it's also interesting because, like, whenever you look at a vision of the future, invariably they get some things right, like video chat on tablets, remote conferencing. Like they got all the people in the boardroom with their faces on there as monolith-like style monitors, and being able to track someone's location, money transactions being through codes, self-driving cars, things like that. They get a couple of things right. They even get a few things that they're trying to poke fun at right without knowing it, like. There's a weird thing where Snipes is out in San Andreas and he finds someone at a booth being affirmed.
San Angeles.
Yeah, San Angeles, yes. Yeah. Being affirmed by a booth that's telling him that he's a good person. You know what I mean? Like basically giving him like a booster. And it's like, well, that's what the car map is. Like that's what ASMR is for. Like the idea of stations that are set up to help people's mental health is actually a pretty good idea. But there are a couple of things I was like, actually, dictatorship aside, there are a few things that are pretty defensible, which I think makes it actually better satire for me.
It nails the fact that Wesley Snipes becomes a criminal as well.
And prophetic indeed.
Let's talk about Snipes and Stallone specifically here. I mean, where are you with these guys' films, and then and now actually? Because for me, they seem to be both having a good run of recent films.
I mean, just sticking with them in this film. I mean, they just play so perfectly off each other. I mean, I was trying to think how to explain it. It's like a fish out of water type film, but it's the water that can't deal with the fish. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's the way the police, the way they've set up this kind of safe society. That classic line where police officers were not trained to deal with this kind of violence. They just can't. they don't know what to do. Sandra Bullock, and it's very much sold as a kind of Stallone versus Snipes, but this is very much a 3-person movie. I mean, Sandra Bullock. With the fish out of water films, you always need someone who is the guide that acclimatizes them, and she is
Madam Exposition.
Exactly. And she, Sandra Bullock's role as Lenina Huxley, which is the most unsubtle character name of all in a kind of post-apocalyptic movie. The fact that she's obsessed with the olden days, which aren't like we said, they're not that long gone. So she she understands them in a way that the others don't, and can help them, get used to this new reality.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about the water not being able to deal with the fish, because this came out in 93. It's the same year that The Last Action Hero came out, which was this was during a rather uneasy period in both Sly and Schwarzenegger's career, which is why there's a reference to each other in both of those movies. Obviously, there's the Schwarzenegger library in Demolition Man, and then in Last Action Hero, you see that in the movie universe of that film, Sly is the Terminator. It's interesting because both of those stars were huge in the 80s. They had their peak as being bravado, machismo, action ideals back in the 80s. And then suddenly the times changed around them. Things got a little bit more politically correct. The whole movie is a satire on censorship. And so both stars had to kind of recalibrate themselves to figure out how to work in the 90s. So with Schwarzenegger, they made Last Action Hero, which is hey, let's take the character from the 80s and let's take him into the real world where movie rules don't apply anymore, and just see how that guy plays off of it. And then with Stallone, it's okay, let's take him into the future where he's no longer considered acceptable, and have all of the culture clash that results from it. So, Arnie has a much better time of it during the 90s because of the Terminator, and his star takes a little bit longer to dwindle before both Stallone and Arnie kind of have resurgences. But you just kind of I really like that it's kind of a meditation on both of their careers and what makes them appealing, and finding some middle ground, because I like that John Spartan's arc is actually to find some sort of middle ground at the end, because he is charmed by Bullock, and he doesn't try and change Sandra Bullock's character Huxley too much. Obviously, fluid transfers aside, you know what I mean? One of the things that I think makes it a really nice repackaging of that 80s sort of machismo is that Huxley actually has a lot of agency in the story. She's the one who has the idea, let's defrost John Spartan. She's the one who actually is the person who moves the plot forward. Yeah. And then, other than him knocking her out at the end in the sort of patriarchal, oh, you don't have to go into danger at the end. Let me risk my life kind of thing. I really love that she actually, they could have gotten a Sharon Stone type and have her put glasses on and then have the glasses come off and the hair come down. They genuinely cast an adorable, brilliant, strong actress, and then she, wins Spartan's respect by the end, and she doesn't do it by suddenly changing everything about herself. She actually is awesome, and you see these little lovely beats where he sees her being tough despite still being Sandra Bullock and Sandra Bullocky, and it's very winning.
The bits where she wins him over, you can see she's trying so hard. It's when you go to I remember going to Corfu once, and I learned how to say thank you in Greek, and all my friends just went into a place and got the thing and left, and I was Eucharisto, and the bank and the person behind the counter was so appreciative that I just tried. It probably sounded the worst way ever, but they were so appreciative that they just tried. So you can just tell that he's oh, you've learned that you're not getting it quite right, but hey, God loves a try compared to everyone else who hasn't got a clue. And that's how like I say, adorable is a fantastic way to turn a phrase there. Helen, what are your thoughts on Stallone and Snipes and Sandra go for Triple S?
I haven't really watched many of their films outside of this. I think for me, it kind of peaked. Maybe for all of the people in here. It's worth also mentioning that Blink and You'll Miss Him, Jack Black is in this in a very early role, and Dennis Leary as well, who reportedly isn't really one of his favourite performances, but it's kind of funny to see, and John Hawthorne as well, isn't it?
Nigel Hawthorne.
Yes,
Mr. Guy. Yeah.
Sir Nigel.
The other Hawthorne. Yep.
In another Last Action Hero parallel, because we had Charles Dance in that film and then Nigel, two British thesps adding support.
and the guy from Beetlejuice as well. I can't remember his name. Playing.
He played Otho in Beetlejuice, isn't that?
Oh, Glenn Shellix.
Yes. That's it.
Just to bring it to kind of current days, Stallone and Snipes have been really good fun in recent films. I mean, Coming to America isn't that great a film, but Snipes is having a whale of a time in it. He was great in that. And the other Eddie Murphy film, which has escaped me, that's also on Netflix.
My Name is Dolomite. Is that one?
Yes. Dolomite is my name.
Dolomite is my name.
Oh, he's fantastic in that.
Yeah, and his Wesley Snipes is absolutely amazing in that. So when I saw this, I was like, well, he's just going back to Simon Phoenix. And And my favourite films featuring Stallone are the most recent Creed films. I think he's actually a good actor.
He's fantastic.
And plays a fantastic role in those. So I always enjoy like those people you think are over the hill coming back. So I'm looking for Sandra Bullock to have her film that brings her back.
I'm really, really glad that there is like a Wesley Snipes kind of going on now with Snipes, because Snipes, like watching this movie again, he truly is the MVP of the movie. Like he does outshine everyone, Stallone and Bullock included, because like you get the feeling that like first of all, he's magnetic. He's dressed as like a psychopathic Dennis Rodman, and yet it still all works. And he has his own like 80s synth theme tune that plays over anything he's doing. He looks like he's walked out of an even sillier movie than the movie is. And yet everything is just like coasts on his natural charisma. And it's kind of funny because when I was watching him, I just thought, what a shame that he didn't like obviously he had the Blade films, which is great, you know, but like he had so much star potential in that one role that I felt like he should have become a bigger star. He's I mean, like half the lines he says in the movie feel like they were ad-libs. You can tell that he was just riffing and they kept a bunch of his lines in because he's just on a 10 the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, these action movies are only as good as their villain, and he must be one of the best villains in action films. He's just having so much fun, and I must take you upon Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman stole Simon Phoenix's hairstyle, not the other way around.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But I mean, the two of them are great. I mean, he's just, you know, just the little things like the different coloured eyes and the crazy outfit, the dungarees. I mean, and then he goes all Mad Max with his. I love the way he's like laughing himself when he's at the vending not the vending machines, the ATM. Yeah. He's like, I don't even know how I'm doing this, and he's just kind of. There's that great. It's like a child in a candy store, isn't he? He's just suddenly. I mean, he starts off a badass, but then he's suddenly got all these. He's been given powers as well. You know, hacking skills, ninja skills, all this kind of stuff, and he's loving it.
Yeah, they must have discovered that if there's ever any plot hole that needs to be figured out, just get Snipes to make a joke about it, to like comment on it, and then suddenly it makes all the sense in the world. Like, oh, great, I've got all this stuff in my head. Like, he just goes with it.
I wonder if the Wachowskis sought this as inspiration for The Matrix. Just uploading
programming
memory.
Yeah. But that's a great running joke. I don't think that's covering a plot hole, because there's the little throwaway moments as well where Sly Stallone starts knitting, and then he gives her a sweater the next day. And they do make a bit of a joke out of it, because at one point, I think where he's in that car crash and he looks like a complete mess, he's like, "Oh, all I need is a needle and thread."
Yeah, break you Mickey Mouse piece of shit. You see, that's one of the things I really like about it, because like, there's an awful lot of this movie that's like poking fun at political correctness and like, you know, like wokeness gone amok kind of thing. And one of the things I like about it is that if you were going to make a straight satire, the thing that makes it really successful in my eyes is how much the scriptwriter actually does a lot of heavy lifting to, even if it's poking fun at something, to make it like defensible in some way. Like Stallone's time that he comes out of, everything fell apart. So he realizes at the end when they said, how are we going to live now that like our grand dictator is gone? And he's like, well, you're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle. You know, you guys are going to get a bit dirty and you guys have to get a bit clean. And somewhere in the middle, you'll figure it out. I love the fact that like, you know, Arnie is railing against his own insecure masculinity, because he does knit her a sweater, and it's actually played really sweetly that he actually does do something sweet for her. And so it's nice to see him playing with that. And at the end, he is asking how to use the 3 seashells, you know, to his credit. And so I like the idea that you can make fun of something while still having built up enough of an internal logic of like, actually, if the world got so bad, there would be an extreme pendulum swing the other way. It's just gone too far. And so like the perfect medium is somewhere obviously in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, talking about things that it got right in the future, I mean, it's spending time on social media. It's not difficult to think there might be quite a large chunk of people who would see that as a utopia. And they do, you know, there are characters in there and they're quite happy living in that kind of world. So it's the perfect kind of centrist dad movie, isn't it? Where it's like, you know, it wasn't right before, this isn't right, we need to bring it back. Somewhere in between, happy medium.
Is there anything else, guys, before we head to the scores?
I can't believe no one's given their opinion about what the 3 seashells is?
Seashells.
Well, that's that.
For me personally, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's the one thing they get wrong. We're still using toilet paper, although maybe it just predicts COVID when we had a run.
Well, I mean, like those high fives in the air, like a lot of that stuff just gave me COVID-like triggers.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God,
No touching.
they're doing everything right. In this version of the universe, COVID never happened. But as far as the 3 seashells is concerned for me, I just sort of assumed it's the Arnold Rimmer toilet wiping of 1 up, 1 down, and 1 to polish.
There is an explanation online. I'm sure Stallone talks about it, where you kind of use them as tongs,
like chopsticks,
and then you use the last one as a scraper. And I'm like, let's keep them.
Who applies them though? The robot from Rocky 3, or
keep the mystery? I think the mystery's better.
I like that. Well, let's head to the scores.
Hello, folks. I'm Sam.
And I'm Martin.
And every week for the last 5 years, we've got together to talk about the musician Tom Waits.
He's a gravelly voice singer that sounded like he doused his vocal cords in bourbon and set fire to them with a cigarette, and wrote such classic songs as Way Down in the Hole, Downtown Train, Jersey Girl.
He's also the gravelly-voiced actor from films such as The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and 7 Psychopaths, both of which coincidentally are on Netflix, and both of which Kobe and Helen have discussed here on Flixwatcher.
So make sure you check those episodes out, and when you have a little bit of a taste for the magic that is Tom Waits, why not head over to songbysongpodcast.com or search for Song by Song in your podcatcher of choice to listen to a little bit more about Tom Waits.
Welcome to the Flixwatcher scores. All of our scores are always out of 5. You may have decimal places if you wish, and we'll start with you, please, Simon, with your recommendability.
I'm going to give this. See, before I watched it, I would have given this a 5, and I probably should give a 5 because this was my choice. But I'm going to go to a 4.5. It didn't quite engage me as much as it did when I was younger, but it's so much fun. Actually, you know what? Can I change it? I'm going to bump it up to a 4.8. I feel 4.5 is maybe a little bit stingy. So if I can change my mind, I'm going to go 4.8. Feel a bit mean.
Of course you can.
It was still a lot of fun. And I mean, it's probably people of our generation, it's probably difficult to find anyone who's not already seen it. But if you've not seen it, like David said, it's a great little snapshot of, big star power Hollywood movies in the early 90s.
David, recommendability.
I think that this movie, recommendability terms, I think this is the kind of movie that like the 4-star was made for. It's not going to be for everyone. Not everyone's into action movies. But if you're into like a big, goofy action movie, this is a 100% recommend for that type of person. So I'm giving it like a 4 because the remaining star is for people like who would never want to touch a movie like this with a barge pole anyway. And so, fuck them. But nothing against the movie. I think that for a big, dumb action film, it actually has an awful lot more going on under the hood than it even needs. I love that they throw so many ideas at the wall and see what sticks. There are obviously a couple of things that haven't aged very well. Like, for example, no matter how utopian our future gets, I never will believe that the police will ever be that defunded. In envisioning the way that society collapsed, they completely sidestep any racial inequality or police brutality that would have been contributing triggers to societal reform like that. This it wouldn't have occurred to a writer in the 90s, let alone like a white writer.
If this is 150 years in the future,
yeah,
this explains away some of this.
Indeed, it's weird. I was watching it going like, there are actually a couple of reasons why I would understand some people would want to scream out for this kind of society. There are a couple of things that, for me felt a little tasteless just by the virtue of when they were made, like the reference to the AIDS epidemic as the reason why people don't have sex anymore. Feels vaguely homophobic and a little bit trite. It tells you just how fresh that must have been in the early 90s. And so if you pick apart the logic, too closely, it falls apart. As a treatise on political correctness, political correctness can be seen to be quite oppressive, but in this story, it is the state that it's imposing its values on the people. Whereas, a lot of the way the times values change is that we negotiate our values with the people in power, and those people in power choose to cater to us or not. So it's very easy to view it as like Orwellian, but I don't think it necessarily is like a perfect metaphor for that. But as a treatise on the importance of the pendulum swing, not being too intense in either direction, it's fun. It's got some moments of genuine nuance. I love the museum fight where they go through the glass into the preserved street from the Los Angeles of their time. It's like, it feels really poetic. It's like a great conceit to see these two relics fighting in their own relic museum. And so, all of that aside, like, you could criticize this movie for a couple of reasons. There are a couple of takes you could make about different things, but what's the point? It's just such a bloody good time. It's just so much fun, and I think it's totally harmless, not offensive to me in any way. You can have strong opinions, but not every take needs to be aired. It's just a lot of fun. The stars are magnetic. The pace is choppy and fun. I just think it's a good old time. So yeah, 4 stars, but for me, that's not a bad thing at all.
Helen.
So it's kind of interesting because I enjoyed this obviously quite heavily on a nostalgia watch as well. And I'd be curious to meet someone watching it for the first time now, because I wonder how much fun they would have, because there are certain things that are a bit like, oh, kind of for you definitely wouldn't get away with that. And because we've got kind of like the nostalgia with it, whether it would land as well. If you haven't seen this, I definitely do recommend you should at least give it a go if you're at least kind of curious about some of the weird futuristic things they think might happen, and the seashells as well. It is a lot of fun. Really don't overthink it. If you start to overthink it, then it loses its kind of fun madness. And for me, it's a solid 4.
Yeah, I'm going to 4.5. I'm going to take that 0.5 away for those people, as Helen said. I think if you were to introduce it to someone now who'd never seen it, and they're a similar age to ourselves, I think that they'd probably ask you what they did to hurt them. How did we come to blows in a way that you recommended this film? Because it is a bit odd. But as a kid in the 90s and 80s, I think it's just it's an obvious choice, right? To Snipes and Stallone in the same film, set in the future. It was everything I wanted to see, and it was great to see again.
It's not Terminator 2. It's kind of like, it's got a lot of like.
Even other
like
Terminator
that.
Movies aren't Terminator 2 though.
So I mean, this is a question I pose to everyone. Films set in the future, just generally, because there's sometimes a lot of them fall just really. By the whole kind of premise, they fall away. They just don't work, do they, in some way, shape, or form? This for me was the 40 years. If it just moved away, and I've said it many times, if it moved to 140 years, then I think I could have dealt with a lot of the other things. Terminator, how Terminator played out, I think that's its own version of the future, which kind of makes sense. But it's when you have a version of the future which is only 10 years ahead, you kind of think, guys, what were you thinking? How does this make any sense? I don't know. What are your thoughts on? So
the way I see it is that a lot of sci-fi movies that try and predict the future, they tend to be giving a view of the present. So here you've got, this fear, the urban fear of cities falling into complete chaos and violence, which we get in the prologue. And then you've also got in the early 90s, there was this kind of big backlash against what everyone called political correctness. So you get that taken to an extreme. This is at the time of the LA riots, and was not long after this, 1992 LA riots. So this must have been in the minds of people. Yeah, so of the screenwriters. So probably the opening prologue, which interestingly was added as kind of a last minute addition. It was added by, I was reading about this, it was added by Fred Decker, the writer of Monster Squad. So this wasn't in the original script. The film was meant to start with Spartan being awakened in the future, but he said something like, Oz won't be very special if you don't see Kansas. So you needed to see Phoenix and Spartan in their natural element. And the one thing I like about the opening is that with a lot of these films, you get this, like Judge Dredd, you'll get this big ponderous opening narration to set the scene and explain what's going on. But you don't need that with this film. You get this glorious aerial shot going over the Hollywood sign in flames, and gunshots and sirens and searchlights, and then this big Chinook helicopter, which is a complete impractical vehicle to take people into a firefight. It's such a brilliant opening. You know exactly what's going on. This is only 3 years in the future. It's completely pessimistic. It's an absolute war zone, and then the contrast between that and waking up in this glorious utopia of lack of violence before you start to see the dark side of it. Is a great vision of the future for me.
I'd say you're absolutely right. I also love that opening because it justifies the opening credits sequence, because I'd completely forgotten that it was just aerial shots going over Sly's naked frozen body like he's the fucking Star Child from 2001. I was like, oh, great. We got a little Sly balls in this movie. But no, in terms of vision of the future, I think just like action movies have a spectrum from silly to really, really like serious and earnest. I think science fiction, exists on a continuum. Like, I view this as like going into the Doctor Who vision of the future continuum, where basically, you'll have episodes where the Doctor will go to a vision of the future that's basically making one satirical point about one part of modern culture, and the rest of it's like, oh, just go with it, suspension of disbelief. We're making a joke. Don't worry. Don't overthink it. But then there's also on the other side of the spectrum, I think, in terms of my favorite sort of sweet spot for sci-fi, something like, to mention the star of the other film that we've covered, Minority Report. That's a really good vision of the future because a lot of the things in that have come to pass. Non-lethal ways to apprehend suspects, touch screens, all of that sort of thing. Advertising that if they could put it into your retinas directly, they would. All that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think this movie does a good job of like trying to predict the future, but there's enough silliness in there that you really don't need to overthink it.
Okay, so repeat viewing score, Simon.
I did enjoy watching this again. I'm not in such a massive rush to watch it again. I would probably give this a 3.5.
David?
I'd give this a 3. Not only have I not really ever thought about it since I last saw it, but like it's a movie where you could probably tune into it at any point in the plot and just watch it.
When was the last time you saw it?
God, it's got to be probably over 10 years ago. It's like a movie that is out of sight, out of mind. The moment I sit down with it, I have a great old time. If it was 5 minutes into the movie, I'd watch it. And if it was 5 minutes before the end, I would sit down and watch it. But I wouldn't sit there and go, do you know what I want to watch right now? Demolition Man. So I'd give it like a 3.
So maybe this is where the Netflix recommendations work. It just beams it in your face and like, yes, this is now. This is
it was
my
meant
now.
for Netflix. For sure.
Helen?
It's pushing 2 hours, 1 hour and 54, which is probably maybe about 20 minutes longer than it probably needs to be like up there in the falls. That said, I had a really great time and I have watched it loads before. Am I going to rush back to it? Probably not. So I'll go with Simon on a 3.5 with this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go for 4.5. I'll watch it. I'll keep on watching it. As long as it's on, it's easy to watch and you can watch it in installments. And it's fun and it's silly. You don't really have to think. So this is something I will carry on watching forever and ever and ever. Small screen score, Simon.
Yeah, I think this kind of suffered. It's a bit of a contradiction because I felt like it suffered being on the small screen, but I've never seen it on the big screen. I had a friend of mine whose dad used to sell VHS tapes to video shops. He'd have a briefcase and he'd open it up. And he'd have the cases that he would take round, like sample tapes that he'd take to video shops. So he would lend me those tapes once they'd done the rounds. And that's when I first saw Demolition Man. So, there was another one I watched on the laptop and it was perfectly fine. Score-wise, I'll probably go 3.5 again.
David?
In terms of small screen, I think I'm going to give it 4 because this is definitely a hangover movie. You could watch it at any point, not have to have any kind of like investment. But that being said, the missing point is because as much as it is definitely a small screen film, I would absolutely kill to go see it at the Prince Charles, popcorn flying at the screen, raucous quip along with the audience. It would be the best time ever. So as much as I have never seen it in the cinema, I wish I could.
Helen?
I've only ever seen it on a TV size screen, and as much as I love it, I don't know if I love it enough to get me to the Prince Charles for it. So I'm going to give it a 5 for small screen.
I'm going 4.2. I would 100% love to see this in Prince Charles. And I would also really enjoy a secret cinema version of this as well. I think that'd be absolutely delightful. Rat burgers, ahoy. Neuro 3D visor things for pretend sex, that kind of stuff. 3 seashells. They'd probably give you instructions how to use, the 3 seashells. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be really good fun. But I've never seen it on small screen, but I aspire to one day see it on the bigger screen. And like you say, throwing popcorn, throwing toilet paper at the screen would be brilliant. Engagement score, Simon.
Engagement score, I'm going to go with 4.5. I think this is partly the reason I gave a low score for the rewatchability. It's because it's just so ingrained in my head. I don't need to watch it again. I can quote it all day long. And it was funny just watching it and trying to guess what was coming next, because even though I hadn't seen it for quite a few years, it was amazing. It was like Within an Eye. The way it just drilled itself into my brain, I knew what the next line was going to be. So yeah, I must say though, I didn't watch it in one go. It took me 2 nights to watch it. Yeah,
that's fair with a new kid as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's very rare for me to be able to get through an entire film in one go, sadly.
David?
In terms of engagement, I give it like a middle of the road 3. There are a bunch of plot lines that I just completely piece out on, like the resistance being just like for most of the movie, they're just the little eye stalk from Jabba's palace popping out of the lawn, like darring their way through the story. I think Dennis Leary's whole like plot is a trope, and it doesn't really ever get paid off. And like, so there's a bunch of parts of the movie where I'm completely sleepwalking through it. That being said, it's still amazing. Like what Simon said about how like a great action movie is as strong as its villain, it's also as strong as the way that villain is killed. And the KO at the end of this movie is worth the price of admission alone. So it for that alone, I'll always watch it because I know it's heading me towards, a fucking frozen head decapitation. And so, yeah, bloody good, but it's a 3.
Helen.
So good when he kicks his head off and it smashes and it's like frozen blood.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, fuck yeah.
Gorgeous.
I could give it a solid 4. I mean, you could easily watch this with half an eye open and, as you've said, hungover, or, you can sit there fully engaged and still kind of have a great time. So, yeah, solid 4.
Yeah, for the same reasons, but I'm going to bump it to 4.5. If you just wanted something to kind of wash over you a bit and just pay attention when the things are getting really silly, then this is your film. But also, if you want to engage in some pure silliness from start to finish, this is also your film. So 4.5. And that gives us an overall score of 4.005000.
It's a good score.
Decent.
Nice.
Decent. And let's head over to Twitter. And for those guys who aren't following us on Twitter, do find us. We are at Flixwatcher Pod. And we always give a shout out ahead of the recordings. In this case, saying we're reviewing Demolition Man with at Film Quiz and Drumble. Have you seen it? Give us your thoughts and your score out of 5 stars for an on-air shout out on Flixwatcher. We had a fair few responses, as I thought might happen for this. Simon, do you want to find one that you like the look of?
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to Retro Ramble Podcast, who calls it a slick Stallone sci-fi satire, slides on reliable gruff form, breakthrough performance from Sandra Bullock and Snipes stealing the show. And then asks an almost impossible question, what's the better 1993 Stallone film, this or Cliffhanger? I would probably say this, just because as much as I love Cliffhanger, and I saw Cliffhanger at the cinema, it does suffer from being the Die Hard on a mountain, whereas this is just completely original.
David?
Alex Elliott, at AlexKid11, says, whoever designed the future from wardrobe to seashells made what would normally be a standard action film a classic. 3.82 stars. So very high standards for action movies, clearly.
Helen.
This one is from Liam H. Dempsey. Wonderfully original and genuinely very funny satire. Sly plus Sandra Bullock are both very charming plus funny in this, but Snipes steals the film in an electric turn. Elliot Goldenthal, meanwhile, provides literally the same score as he does in Schumacher's Batman films. 4 stars. It's a good score.
Yeah, no, maybe that's why I got such like Batman vibes.
It's that crazy boing, 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 weird music that plays whenever the Two-Face appears.
A lot of trumpets.
Simon, I think there's a couple more, isn't
there? Yeah, there's a couple of good ones. I wanted to mention, is it Phil Tragan? Phil Tragan Photo, who says it's a blueprint of what sci-fi action movies ought to be like. The future is half Jetsons and half 1984, and if it weren't for Bullock, Snipes would run off with the whole show. I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, I think they're pretty level pegging. In fact, I'd probably say that Stallone is probably the weakest, but that's possibly because he's just doing Stallone. He's the big muscly dude, whereas Snipes is just absolutely off his head, and Bullock is this wide-eyed, she's so enthusiastic. Absolutely love her in this film.
Hallmark of Greatness at Hallmark of Great says, it's one of my favorite nonsense films. Contains Jesse Ventura and Jack Black, which is good, but features Dennis Leary, which is bad. Also has some questionable racist stuff in there too, but a solid 7.5 from me. Stallone...
It's out of 5, Hallmark of Greatness. It's out of 5. I can't do that math.
It's amazing that
no one can.
There's quite a big supporting cast. I mean, Benjamin Bratt probably deserves a mention as well, because he's the great character who ends up going over to the side of the Scraps, who are like these rejects from Thunderdome living in the sewers.
Feels like there's a deleted scene there.
Absolutely,
where in his transformation, you know what I mean? Feels like that's on the cutting room floor.
Yeah. And then you've got Rob Schneider as well, which he probably hasn't been mentioned for obvious reasons.
Probably one of his most tolerable performances.
Speaking of deleted scenes, apparently there is a moment. We were talking before about why it's not set further in the future. And you've got that connection between... It's Zachary Lamb, that's the guy's name. So that's Grandel Bush in the past, and then Bill Cobbs in the future. And there's a scene where he drives them to the final confrontation and stays with the car. Now, apparently he gets killed by Phoenix, because Phoenix steals the police car, but they don't show that scene. So that maybe would have, added a bit more of a reason for that connection between Stallone and that guy's character.
Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Flixwatcher Podcast. Can you sign up by telling everyone where we can find you? online, and we'll say goodbye to the listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a great time talking about this film. You can find me at film_quiz. And then hopefully once we're back running the quizzes, come and see us in London, various other venues. Thank you.
You can find me on Twitter at drumble, and I talk a lot about my job in animation and get into all of my favorite podcast DMs.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thanks so much
for joining us.
on.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's
Awesome.
been a blast. Be well.
Bye. Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.